Then we're under, I think, in the first column on page Ayin Daled. And in the next one it says, well, Amdi Bozeh. So I just looked at this before, and I didn't know what it was talking about, so I looked it up. It's not really a sugya for the Muslim, but when I say, but Amdi Bozeh, while I was in this Indian of selling chametz before Pesach, Tomati Amash Heviu Achroni B'Shem Habach. So I didn't know this Bach, I just looked it up now, but I looked up before last week, because they were expecting to learn last week. He says, the Roy Lahachmer Shal Lo Limkar Kutach Lagoy Tol Shloshim Yom Pesach. So the shayla is like this. There's a mission that says that Beis Shammai says you're not allowed to sell chametz to a goy within 30 days of Pesach unless you know it's going to be consumed before Pesach. It's not clear why. It's the Rabbanans, and some people say it's even the rice is the heels 30 days you're mechuyev to make sure it's mavur by Pesach. So if you know it's going to be consumed, it's good enough. If you know it's not going to go. So it's a natural, but we don't pass like Beis Shammai. We pass like Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says you're allowed to sell your chametz to a goy even if it's not going to be consumed. Then the Gemara says, and there's a third sheet in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, that says you shouldn't sell a goy kutach. A kutach is some kind of mixture with taruvas of chametz, some kind of
dip.
Dip. Yeah, but it has chametz in it.
Right.
So the question is, what's the big machlokas Rishonim? Who Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira is going like? So Rashi learns that Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira holds like Beis Shammai, and a lot of Rishonim go like that. So Mela, we don't have to worry about Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira because he's going like Beis Shammai. Why Dafka does he mention Kutach? I don't remember, but it's not Lalach. Other Rishonim, Tosfos over there says it's not Mistaver that Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira will be going like Beis Shammai. So Tosfos makes up that even according to Beis Hillel, that allows you to. There's no Indian of you have to make sure it's gotten rid of. And you could sell chametz to a goy even though you don't think he's going to consume it before Pesach. When you sold it to a goy, so it's the goy's. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira is machmer by kutach, and it seems the reason he's machmer is because something kutach, for some reason it's nicker. It was the Jews. I don't know why it's nicker, but I guess Jewish people made kutach. So there's some kind of svara that's something that's nicker to be a Jews. The Rabbanan were machmer. You shouldn't sell it to a goy if it's not going to be consumed, because people will see it by the goy's house on Pesach, and they'll think you gave it to him on Pesach, you sold it to him on Pesach. So it's a different, so like a chumra de Rabbanan, not to sell kutach to even according to Beis Hillel, not to sell kutach or anything where the Shem Yisrael is nicker on it, is it's us. Even according to this, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira is going even according to Beis Hillel. So we don't fear stuff like that. We fear stuff like the Rishonim that say Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira is only leaving to Beis Shammai. According to Beis Hillel, is never a problem, and that's the minig. But the Bach says, I just looked up again. I looked it up last week. That the Bach says it's a nice chumrah to be, because it's mistaver to him that Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira wouldn't be going like Beis Shammai. He's going according to Beis Hillel. So it's mistaver to him that chametz, which is nicker to be a Jews. Midrabanan, the Jews shouldn't sell it to a goy.
So he's saying it's a three-row machlokas.
Yeah.
So he's saying Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira is machmer in Beis Hillel.
Right, I'll leave it to Beis Hillel. Doesn't hold it with Beis Shammai, but something which is nicker is a new chashash.
We're not concerned about following another Tanaic Shita Keneged Beis Hillel. I mean,
no, it's not Keneged Beis Hillel. Just saying, I'll leave it as Beis Hillel. It doesn't hold. You have to see that it's destroyed before Pesach. He's saying even according to Beis Hillel.
So he's saying even according to Beis Hillel. So it's not a third. It's another understanding of Beis Hillel.
Yeah, it's a new chashash, nothing to do with the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. It's a new chashash that there's kutach business. So the Bach only says, I just looked it up again. He says the olam isn't knowing like this, but I'm machmer tov olav bracha because it's mistaver to him that Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira should be the halacha according to the Yeshitas, like Tosfos, because he says it's amazing. He says he brings like most Rishonim, the Rambam and the Rif, they don't bring Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira and everything like that. Most of the Rishonim don't. They learn like Rashi, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira is going according to Beis Shammai. But he says the Ri and one other Balei Tosfos says this halacha that it's even a little bit of Beis Hillel, but kutach is aser. And he says they're the Amudei halacha. And he says, even though we're talking about the Rabbanos, we're not talking about they're the Amudei halacha. And he says the Aguda paskas like them, and the Aguda is this main halacha. It's like the Aguda. I didn't know these things. And he says, therefore, it's a good, we should be machmer. But then he says the Welt is not knowing to be machmer. So he says he can't make someone be machmer, but a machmer tabel of bracha. So he's saying, I don't understand why he has to say that Achronim bring the Bach. He has the Bach. The Roy Lahachmer Shlolim Karkutach Lagoy Tov Shloshim Yom LePesach. The Tamoa. So I guess that's why he's asking around. The Achronim bring the Chumra of the Bach, but the Shaloi view that is Hayushalmi Parakamid of Sachim Hanau, the Mavur that says over there, the Rav Sivul Yisrael Limkor Kutach Shid Kida Wetzlo Bashas Chamishis. In other words, he's saying that that's why it's into the section, because he was talking about a goy sell. If you have a Bikari, you should sell it before Pesach. That's why he said sell it for Zman. You don't have to sell it for Leolam, right? So he says in this sugya he saw that the Yishalmi says that the Jew has kutach of another Jew, so he shouldn't sell it before the 5th hour, because before the 5th hour it always could be used. But once it's the 5th hour, it's still mutter banoy. You could sell it, but it's usher to eat. So he said you got to get rid of it because it has chametz in it. You have to get rid of it. So you see, you're allowed to. How do you get rid of it? You sell it to a guy. Yeah. So he says it's preferred shalmi that you could sell kutach to a guy. So he said, why don't the achronim bring this Yishalmi? It's not like the chumrah of the Bach. I guess what he means is the Yishalmi is a right to the other Yishalmi that we don't make this rabbanon of not selling kutach. So that's all I know about it. I didn't know much about it. We're dealing with Chashash's Rabbanan, so I'm not so sure. And he buys with Tzarachin. And this wasn't even in the Minchas Chinuch, which is part of the Talmudic. And I want to start a new Inyan. Okay. Huh?
Good. No.
Okay. Someone acquired from another Jew chametz, but the type of kinyan he made was only a kinyan which the Rabbanan agreed to. The Raisa wasn't a proper kinyan. For example, he made Mashicha, which is a kinyan Rabbanan, Agav Karka. He made there's such a thing as a kinyan Agav. You could make a kinyan on Karka and become a metalton, which are even on the Karka, or even according to the way we pass, even not on the Karka. And there are shitas, it's not so clear, but he says, like he says, Ba'asorim do the Rabbanan. Because there are shitas that hold Agav as the Raisa that get kinyan. But there are Tosasin that say, these machlokas is a different Tosasin, but there are Tosasin that say that Agav is only the Rabbanan. So now we want to say if someone acquired chametz with a kinyan which is only valid according to the Rabbanan, like a Mashicha and Metaltlin, or a kinyan Agav, if you hold Agav is Rabbanan, him over B'Bal Yerah min Torah. So the Jew who made that kinyan, the Rabbanan, would he be over, because according to the Torah, l'chora, he didn't acquire it, he over B'Bal Yerah min Torah, kiven the lo havi shalom min Torah, because according to the Torah, he never made a kinyan. L'chora, this question is a general shaila, Tali b'din ya'idei d'Rabbanan nasa d'Raisa. There's a general shaila on many, many issues. If a kinyan d'Rabbanan helps mid'Raisa. And some people say, it's not so clear how to learn that machlokas, but some people say the whole kinyan d'Rabbanan works, but the Rabbanan have a koach of hefker bezdin hefker. And that's the koach that the Torah gives them. So, but then there's a shail of hefker bezdin hefker is only a koach to make something hefker or to be maknet to someone else. Right? So some people say if you hold hefker bezdin hefker, it's a koach to be maknet to someone else. Then whoever acquires it through a kinyan d'Rabbanan is deraisa. But if you hold hefker, bezdin hefker is only a koach, and it's telling the psukim that you darshan on, is only a koach to be mafkiya from someone, and it's no longer his, it becomes hefker. But your kinyan is not to be maknet to you, so then your kinyan is only a d'Rabbanan. But he says that's a general shaila, nothing to do with just plain chametz. There's always a shaila of a kinyan d'Rabbanan as the year is mid'Raisa. In other words, if you buy a lulav with a kinyan d'Rabbanan, would it be lachem according to the Torah? He says l'chor, this would be the same shaila. He says be'emes, but he says now he wants to say that no, it has nothing to do with that machlokas. In other words, he wants to say could be even if you hold a kinyan d'Rabbanan isn't considered yours mid'Raisa, could be over here by chametz it's going to be worse. Ach be'emes ima chametz b'shuso, if the chametz is now in his property, to go in shemashach, like let's say he made a mashiach into his rishus, Af inema de ein drabanan nasa davar Torah. Even if you say a kinyan drabanan is not mahani the deraisa, doesn't make it yours min a Torah. The Torah doesn't recognize it's not a Torah like a kinyan. I'll call upon him who achroyosa, because it's still, if anything happens to it, he's going to lose. He's not going to be able to go to the owner and say I don't have any responsibility for it. And he's going to be held, since midrabanan it is his, right? He's going to lose out, and if anything happened, he's going to have to. If he didn't pay the money, he's going to still have to pay the money. So he says so. Afi nema the ein derabanan nasa dvar Torah. Even though his kinyan isn't deraisa, it's only derabanan. I call upon him who bachriusa. He's an achroi for it. V'im yavo lebezin nifsok, in a case of achrayas that brought to bezin with halacha, bezin will say, well, it was yours with the rabbanon, it's your loss, right? Plus, they're going to paskin shechayev bachriusa. So im kain, so therefore there's a svara v'lo gora michametz shalacherim shekibu anifked achrayas. We said by chametz, we don't have to own it to be over by a raw. We have a ribu that as long as you're achroi, even if it belongs to someone else, mamish, and you're only achroi, right? So he said, why would this case be any worse than any case of a chametz shalacherim shekibu anifked achrayas the over by a raw min haTorah? He says, and even if it's not on his property, but he has a kinyan d'Rabbanan, because let's say kinyan agav, we said agav doesn't have to be on your karka. The gon shekana b'agav karka b'hachametz is still odana b'shus l'mocher. Af iyamrin, and even if you're going to say the havi kekibel of achrayas, he's achroi for such chametz, become makom the din is mekabel achrayas l'chamsa shechavera beis chavera einu over l'divrei kol. He said the Rishonim say that we have a pasuk that if you're mekabel achrayas, it's enough to be yours to be over by Yirah. That's only with mekabel achrayas, and it's en Yerushalayim. That even though you don't own it, but you're achrayas for it, we have a riboy that you're chayav. But he says Rishonim say that if you have achrayas or something, but it's not in Yerushalayim, you're not over it. So he says, l'chora, in this case, so he wants to say that if kinyan d'Rabbanan isn't good, so it's not yours, but you're achroi. So he said, then you'll tell me, well, it matters where it is now. If it was a Mashiach, you brought it to Yerushalayim, so you're achroi on something which is in Yerushalayim. But if you say it was a kinyan agav, and it's not in Yerushalayim, so it could be the fact that you're achroi, you'll argue, so what if I'm achroi, but achroi says, I'm not over by Yerah, and achroi says it's not Mishus. So mikol makom near the over. He says he doesn't like that argument. Why? Because lo mi boy la hasovrim the chemsa beis chavera over. He says, not only according to this people who say that if you have chametz, real chametz, not a Christ like a chametz, if you have chametz the beis chavera in someone else's house, you're over. And the question is why you're over? It's not in your rishus. Right? So the din is, we said before, as far as the chutzner hanifkid kani la mafkid having rishuso, that if you're keeping someone in someone's house, it's like he's allowing you to use his house to keep the stuff. It's like considered your rishus. And the reason you're not over if you have a chrayas on something in your friend's house, the reason over there is the ein hachutzer kanila. There we don't say the owner of the house is being makbid, giving you rishus, right? Because when it's your chametz, he's letting you keep your chametz in his house. Then you say it's a svara that he's not going to you his rishus to keep it there. He says, well, but if it's not really your chametz, just you're achroi, but we don't say that. In the case we only have the price, we don't say such a story that he gives him over the rishus. It's not because he's not the owner of it; he's just achroi for it. But in this case, kivin I'll call upon him havididei l'chol mili. But over here we're talking about that's time he has the chrayas. Here he does have a kinyan d'Rabbanan. Right. So the use of it, Midrabanan, he has the right to do whatever he wants with it, and has the use of it, even if the Torah doesn't recognize it. So the svara is that the person who lets you keep it in his house is maklan the rishus to you, because you are the one in charge of that. It's not time you have a chrois for. Your mamish have a kinyan d'Rabbanan. Shach shaper shehishel anifkid chatzerel mamono shlamafkid imkin have the rishuso. Right? Yeah, feel the kibbul of achrayas sagi over min Torah, because the fact that you have achrayas, and normally if it's in someone else's house, it's achrayas, but it's out of your rishus. But here, since you have a kinyan d'Rabbanan, he's saying it's svara that the mafkid is allowing you to store your thing in his house, so he's giving you rights to his house, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says, "But after kibbutz b'achrayas, after having motzi b'yado mikol makom beis chaver eino over."
We missed one.
I skipped the line.
Yeah, feelable.
Oh, I'm sorry, skipped. Afilu below tamza. So that's his first svara.
So, and this, the fact that the rishus, the person owns the land, just gives it to him. There's no need for a kinyan
Right.
on the line.
How that works, I don't know. Just the use of it is enough. I don't know how that works. It's a good hara, but I don't know the answer. Filu below tamza, and even without this argument that the mafkid, since he has a kinder d'Rabbanan, is giving him rishus, so without that time, near laid we call makom. He says kivin the chamad shalo l'chol davar. Since he actually owns it, he could use midrabanan. He owns it, and he could do whatever he wants with it. That itself makes it matzah b'yado. And after the kibbutz of achrayas, after having matzah b'yado, mikamak on beis chaver ene over. Even in a normal case, we say if you have achrayas, it's called matzah b'yado, but you're not over if it's in someone else's house. Ayin ta simen tov mem sikandal shekasa du batechem nafkuan deinu over beis chavero koi ala chiddush lo yimatzeh. This is more darson of batechem. So the Taz says it doesn't mean if you own chametz and you have it in someone else's house, you're not over. It means in the case that we have a chiddush of kibbutz b'achrayas that you're over. That's not it. That's only when it's in your rishus and not in your friend's rishus. But the Taz says the garon the mammon is kamaman dummy. If you have a case of garon the mammon and you hold like Rosh Shimon, the garon the mammon is kamaman dummy. So achrayas makes it like your mammon. Ain't kan chiddush. He says according to Rosh Shimon you don't need this pasuk. Because if you have achrayas, it's garam the mammon is kamaman dummy. So there, then he says over afilu beis chavero. In other words, the Taz is saying this that we say that if you have achrayas, you're chayiv on chametz, but not if it's beis chavero. He says that's only because it's not really yours. We don't hold davar garam the mammon is kamaman dummy, and that's why you're over, even if it's in your shus, and not if it's the batech says you're not over if it's in the other guy's shus. But he says if it's actually yours, and for example, according to Reb Shimon, that holds when you're achroy, it's davar garon the mammon is kamaman dummy. The Taz says you're going to be over. Ayin sham. So he says kan. He says near. But this case where besides the achrayas you have a kinyan d'Rabbanan which allows you to actually use it. The kan near a pasha the adat mi garon mammon. He says this case where you have a kinyan d'Rabbanan is much stronger than a garon mammon. The be'emes mammon today. Well, this is mammon. In the Rabbanan it says, but Rishus Lishlamer, and the fact is, Lamaisa he could use it and do whatever he wants with it. It's considered his. But Rishus Lishlamer, but Limkor, Balasos, Koma Shriyatza, Vali have a mammon today. He says this is certainly going to be considered mammon today. He's saying it's a higher madriga than davar garon mammon. The over after beis chavero l'shitus eila. So he said two different svaras. First, he said, look at it as a chiyuv achrayas, and achrayas you're over, and even though normally you're not over with achrayas but beis chavero, he said that's because the guy isn't makidu the makom, but over here he is makidu the makom because he knows it's yours midrabanan. And then he said, without the sword that he's makidu the makom, he said there's also a sword to him, just like the Taz says that the old davar garon mammon kamaman dummy. So when you're achraya, even if it's someone else's house, you're going to be chayav. The pasuk says you're not chayav, it's only if your garon mammon is not kamaman dummy, right? So he says here also, he says this is better than garon mammon is kamaman dummy, and you're going to say you're going to be chayav enough for chametz, even though in a Torah it's not yours, but since you have achrayas and you have the use of this chametz and everything like that, so even if the guy is not makna the rishus, he holds you should be over.
But if he's not makna, I thought you're assuming that he is makna.
No, in the first case he's saying, this first mahalach is, we assume he is makna. Right. Since now he's saying even if he's not makna, he holds it's a svara that the Torah doesn't exclude this kind of case. In other words, this what the Taz says, the Torah only excludes the only Torah only excludes the case of batechem, that you need batechem by a case of achrayus, which is not really yours, it's only a ribui.
Right.
But he says if Yod Davar Gar L'Mammon is Kamam Dami, you're chayev with achrayus without even in your friend's house.
But even if it's your chametz, can we say the argument that that the owner gives you the place? That's only according to. I thought one of the arguments was that even
that
if
was the case, you only have he's saying you only need the owner to give you the place where you only have the price. But if it's actually yours, in other words, if I stam have my thing, which not stam I have a price, he's saying the Taz is saying you don't need him to give you the place. The way I argue that's a chiddush of the Taz.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but he's going according to that Taz. If Taz holds by Garam L'Mammon, so here he says this is better than Garam L'Mammon.
I thought that there was the svara that we had before the svara that if you own it in his place,
because that's what he's starting at. He says according to Taz, B'Teichem is this drasha. You need to be B'Teichem and not in B'Teichem is only if you hold. It's going on the case of the Torah's Marba Kibul of Achrayas. But what's actually your mammon, and even if it's only Garla mammon, and you hold Garla mammon is Kamam Dami, there's no such drasha B'Teichem. It's even wherever it is.
And B'Teichem leaves out Achrayas. Otherwise, you would think Achrayas is okay. Yeah. And that's what leaves out Achrayas.
That's what the Taz says. And then he says it's not a popular Taz. After Divri Taz Tamolim V'Hergishu Achroni. And he says their argument is the Be'emes After Reb Shimon Khan Lav Kamam Dami. This you have to know what it means. What it means is this: the normal case of Reb Shimon is the person is makdash an animal, and as soon as he's makdash an animal, it belongs to hekdesh. Let's say he said Harei Alai, so he sets aside an animal. If anything happens to the animal, he's going to have to replace it because he said Harei Alai, so he's a chroi, right? So now if someone steals that animal, so we hold that he stole from hekdesh. He didn't steal from this person, even though this person had a chrayas. So what? Davar Gar L'Mammon is not Mammon Dam. Shimon holds no. If someone stole it, since the Baal had a chrayas, and he's going to have to replace it. So Davar Gar L'Mammon, that's why it's Garam L'Mammon. Davar Gar L'Mammon is Kamam. I mean, this person is considered an owner, even though it belongs to hekdesh, but he has enough bias. Since he's achroi, if anything happens to it, he's going to have to suffer the loss because he's going to have to replace it. So Davar Gar L'Mammon is Kamam Dami. So the case of Reb Shimon is that, and the case that the Gemara brings of Reb Shimon, Davar Gar L'Mammon is Kamam Dami, is talking when his achrayas went into effect. In other words, let's say I was makdash and you stole that animal. So once it was stolen, I'm achroi. So we say my achrayas really went into effect, and therefore you're going to be chayav to me if you owe Goran L'Mammon is because that was you took something which is a Goran L'Mammon because now I'm going to have to replace it. But the Gemara says that if I'm watching something and I have achrayas on it, and it's banned, let's say you gave me chametz or let's say gave me chametz before Pesach and I'm achroi for it. The Gemara says it's not his. The Gemara says, the one lashon the Gemara says, but it's a Davar L'Mammon, and if you darshan this pasuk for the case of achrayas, it's not going like Reb Shimon, because Reb Shimon you don't need a pasuk. It's Davar L'Mammon. Then the second lashon the Gemara says is no, that's not even called a Garam L'Mammon. According to Reb Shimon, it's only a Garam L'Mammon when the achrayas goes into effect, like if someone steals it. But he says at this point, someone gave you chametz to watch, and you're achroi. At that point, it's banned. If the guy wants it back, you could give it to him. It's there. You have it. You only have a possibility that you might end up being achroi. If something happens, you're going to be achroi. So the Gemara says you only see that Reb Shimon holds Garam L'Mammon is Kamam Dami when he's actually not only a possible achroi, he has a chrayas if something happens, but you only see Reb Shimon saying Garam L'Mammon Kamam Dami when he actually is achroi, like after it's stolen.
Actually stolen.
Let's say the case he was hektish. At the time it's hektish, he says he's achroi. If anything happens, he's going to have to replace it. So the Gemara's second lesson is, at that point, it's not considered his mammon. Because it's only a possible inyan that he could give it to hektish. Who said anything's going to happen? He could give it to hektish. It's not, there's no achroi, so he doesn't have any loss in it. He's a potential loss. Once someone steals it, we say, you brought him the loss, and now he's going to have to replace it. So we consider it like you stole from him. But the Gemara says, if I'm achroi for chametz, so nothing happened to the chametz. So if the guy wants it back, I could always give it back. If the guy wants it back, I have it, I give it back. Even though I have a potential achrayus if something happens. Right. But until something happens, even Rishim would agree that Deborah Golamama is not Kamaman dummy.
Chametz were actually concerned while it's Ba'ain and what's that you have a price. Right. By the theft already happens.
Yeah. That's what the Gemara says. So some people learn, so that's what the Gemara says. Even according to Reb Shimon, you need a pasuk to say you're chayav on chamesh kibul of achrayus, because you can't say Deborah German Lamama is Kamam Dami since it's Hadar Ba'en.
Right.
Okay. So and that in the second lashon there's a famous kasha, because the Gemara says that by Irani Dachas, if there was hektish that there was achrayus on, so we say according to Shimon, Deborah German Lamama is Kamam Dami, is part of the Irani Dachas, so it can't be makriv or anything like that, because it's part of the Irani Dachas. So the Rishonim asked, I don't know if Rishonim, the Chronim asked, but there was banned, nothing happened to it. There he had a chrayas on it. So that's a kash. So some people say what the Gemara means in Psachim is that without a pasuk, I would say in such a case, you don't say Deborah German Lamama is Kamam Dami. But once I have a pasuk by chametz to say you're over by a rob by a matzah, it's not some a chiddush in chametz. It's a chiddush according to Reb Shimon that even that's called Deborah German Lamama is Kamam Dami. So once Reb Shimon has that pasuk, he holds all over. Even before anything happens, we say Deborah German Lamama is Kamam Dami. Interesting. Anyway, that's a shiloh.
By Irani Dachas, didn't we say that it was already, even once the Irani Dachas already has a den of being destroyed or something like that? We say something that
first you have to paskin if it's an Irani Dachas.
Right.
Does this belong to the Irani Dachas? So you have to first paskin if it's going in the moment, if it's not Kamam Dami, it's not part of the Irani Dachas. So that's interesting.
So what you're saying is that it's not part of the Irani Dachas, therefore it's not like it's part of the Irani Dachas, and it's not part of the Irani Dachas.
There's a Rabbi Chaim that says that even if it's very fair to say that pasuk is mechanash by chametz, a whole new category of Deborah German Lamama is Kamam Dami, we apply it all over. All the big acronym say that the answer conscious, because there's a whole bunch of Gemaras. I remember the one here in Dakar. There's other Gemaras also that seem to say that even when it's the end, we say Deborah German Lamama is Kamam Dami. Not like that second lashon.
Right.
To say that all those Gemaras are going like the first lashon, it's hard. So you have to say that the second lashon is the pasuk is being mechadish, that the new din of Deborah German Lamama is Kamam Dami. It's hard. It's a special pasuk by chametz. How do we know to say a whole new yesod in Deborah German Lamama? But there's a Reb Chaim that says that it depends on what kind of achrayus. He says like this. He says when a person makes a neder harei alai to bring a korban, right? So from that point on, he's responsible to bring a korban. So now he sets aside a korban. So with that korban, he said inside he's fulfilling his responsibility. But if anything happens to that korban, he's going back to his original responsibility. And that responsibility was there before this animal. Fakir, he was using this animal to fulfill his responsibility. but the responsibility was there the whole time. So he says, in such a case, everyone would agree that according to Rav Shimon, Davar Gamal Mammon is Kamaman Dami, because the responsibility was there. You can't say he only becomes responsible later. He was responsible from the very, very beginning. But I'm a shomer. He says, you give me something to watch and I have achrayas, so as long as Ba'en, I don't have any responsibility. I can give it right back to you, and there's no responsibility there. If something happens, I was machayah myself, if something happens, that's when I become responsible. So that's why the Gemara says by chametz, where Shimon won't hold, if you're a shomer, if you have achrayas, he won't hold davar gamal mammon as kamaman dam, because it's hadar ba'en. He says hadar ba'en just means I'm not responsible yet till something happens. But by the case of hektish, he says I'm responsible originally. I was using that animal to fulfill my responsibility, but the responsibility was there. So he says, in such a case, there's no chilik, it was be'en or not be'en. You say, Deborah go on the moment is kamam and dummy. That's what plans. And Nachiezer are also like that. I looked up today, saw that in my notes. It said, I knew the Reb Chaim, but it says it's not Nachiezer too. It's as far as being mechalik in different types of...
the Sfar makes a lot of sense. I mean, the fact is that the responsibility exists prior to the object, so the object fits into the responsibility. So therefore, the object removes, you go back to the original responsibility. Over here, there's no responsibility until you lose the object.
It's not going on the moment until it actually. Not so special, but it's a chilik, that's for sure.
No, it's sure.
The question is, you have to know the Gemaras and the Rishonim and see if it fits in.
I mean, I'm trying to figure how would it apply to your Gafet. Like, I'm trying to...
He's saying over there that person had an animal, he made when a mercy is hektish, he's a cry.
He's already a so it was hektish.
That was the case of hektish. That was the case that he had a cry, so it's hektish.
So they must have gone through every case. And
he must have. Yeah. But then you have to go through Rishonim and see if it fits into Rishonim or not. But the other earlier discussions, they don't say such a thing there. A lot of backgrounds say, like I told you, that once the Gemara says that there's a pasuk that by Chametz you're over, from that pasuk we learn out to all over that even when it's bad, but that's hard to hear. That's
right. I mean,
it's possible, but it's hard.
Especially since by Bayra and by Matzah there's already special halachas in the ownership, and that's like it's not like a
but who knows? Maybe according to Shimon there is no special halachas. You're saying special halachas because we pass and go on the is not kamam and dami, and you have a pasuk you're over with a chrayas, so we say you don't need a real ownership.
Right.
Maybe if you hold go on the is kamam and dami, and this pasuk is only telling you that this is also called garam mamon, so there is no. It's a regular din of ownership. Because Garam Mamman is Kamam and Dami. So you don't know according to Shimon that they're special. If you learn the second way, even though in such a case even Shimon agrees it's not Garam Mamman, except there's a special pasuk, then you end up with special things. But the way they're learning, rather than Mechadash it's special. But rather than Mechadash it's special, be Mechadash that this is also called Davar Garam Mamman Kamam and Dami, and it's not special.
Okay. I mean,
it's still a very hard thing to Mechadash.
Right, especially, no time about that.
He says this. So it comes out, he's saying the Taz is saying like this, that the whole drush of Batechem, if it's out of your rishus, out of your house, you're not over, that's only in the case of Chamash Kibul B'Chrayas, which is a Chiddush. And in that case, you're not over if it's not in your house. But if you hold Goran the Mammon as Kamam and Dami, then you are over even if it's not in your house.
Right.
So he says Divrei Taz Timoim. Pergishu Achronim. And Achronim asks us on the Taz, why the Be'emes after Reb Shimon can lab Kamam and Dami. So that's the chapter, because they're learning even according to the second lashon, because the Gemara says if it's Hadar Be'en, if I am a Shas P'safim Davav, keep the Hadar Be'en, that when it's still Be'en and nothing happened yet, even Reb Shimon holds it's not Gar on the moment. And still, you're going to be Chayiv, right? So he says, so according to Shimon, you have this pasuk of Batechem also. Become a Kan, keeping the. So that's by Garlamam. Now he's going back to what he said before. But this case, where you have Achrayas, and it's more than just Achrayas, you have a Kinyan Rabbanan that allows you to use and do whatever you want and sell it. Become a Kan, keeping the Rashoy Lishtamesh, Vadi Aleph Migarlamam Bawishlo. He says, here for sure would be considered Shalom. over min Torah afilu below achrayus. He holds us a svara that you would be over the raisa, even if your kinder rabbanan is not man the raisa. But the very fact that you could use it and do whatever you want with it, and the courts will allow you to do it, no one can stop you because you have a kinder rabbanan. That's called motzeh biyado, and it's the bigger motzeh biyado than having achrayus, and you'll be over even the beis chavera. As his first svara says, the guy is makna to you. He's even without the svara, he's makna to you. He holds that that's called motzeh biyado. Kain near Lathian is like the Bezos Shemis Barach. Yesh Od Laharach. He says, I could say other stories. It's very nice, the stories that he's saying. It's not Muchach, but it's very nice. Yesh Od Laharach Ach Lo Yaspik Hamon Gilyonos B'Divri Achronim. He says, once I'm dealing with Achronim Sfaras, I would have to have many Gilyonim to work it out.
It's very interesting what you said beforehand. To come up with the svara is one thing. I mean, it obviously shows genius or whatever. But the truth is you know when the Rabbi Chaim and Eliezer said something like that, it's not just the fact they came up with the brilliant svara.
They know what the Gemaras
to work it all out. It's like
not only they know the Gemaras, they know the Rishonim, they know the Achronim.
Right.
No, but I've said this before, and I say it again, that a lot of times Rabbi Chaim will say a svara, and he'll be bedafka saying a svara in the Rambam. Or you take Reb Chaim al Rambam, and it's clear that from the Reb Chaim, he's not saying that Rishonim hold like this. He's a Maser Machlokas Reb Chaim, the Rambam, and Tosas, or And he's saying, but yet in the yeshiva world, they'll use Reb Chaim's svara like that's a fact. And he never meant it to be, they'll use it for Tosas. It was a svara and a Rambam. It was a Mahalach and a Rambam. And people don't realize that. They think. They ask Kashas, Tosas is not like Reb Chaim. How could Reb Chaim not be like Tosas? Whoever said it in Tosas. Like, you can't ask Kashas on it from. He said it's like that's a cloud, but a lot of times he was saying it and specifically in different people, and you see that it's obviously it's machlokas, and you have to know who we said it in.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
What time is it now?
9:21.
So we have a few minutes. Okay. Binay. Ilalav hazah, this lav of Bar Yirah by Yamatzeh, yesh takana, you could get around this lav, the bittul hachametz bizman heter, because you can only do bittul while it's still mutter, but if you do bittul chametz before it became aser, ain't over. Bittul alone, min reis of a bittul b'yal masagi, that once you do bittul, you're not going to be over anymore Bar Yirah by Yamatzeh. Kamosha kasas sham tosat daf dalan adayz the remas min reis. And Tosas explains how does bittul work. Tosas explains it to have the hefker that when you do bittul, you're being mafkirit. Ve'eno she lo. Right. So now we're saying uchametz shekibo b'chrayis. Let's say you have chametz which you're achrayt for. Oh, machmas tovas hanor, or not that you're achrayt for, but it's yours because you have tovas hanor. So we said if you have chametz or truma, you have tovas hanor to give it to any coin you want, and you hold. There's a machlokas of tovas hanor as mammon or not. Gabe kishalo lo mahani bittul behefker. This is really a shagasari that says that it's a chiddush that you're over on chametz shel achrayt, but it doesn't make it yours. So how could it be mafker something which is not yours? In other words, if you learn bittul actually means hefker.
Right.
Right. So he says, how could he mafker something which is not you really don't own? You can't. He says you're achroi, you can't be mafker your achrayus, and you don't own it. So how could hefker help on something which is not yours?
And what about the tovas hana? The hefker wouldn't work because it's disabled because it's truma. You just can't be mafker truma because
it's not his. The truma belongs to the kohen, so you can't be mafker. Truma belongs to Sheva Kohen. So it's truma. You have a right to pick the kohen to give it to, but it's not yours, and you're not going to be mafker it.
Right. And you still, but the fact that you can't be mafker your tovas hana, that gets into the issue whether it's moment or not.
Yeah, but even if it's moment, I don't think you could be mafker that someone else will get the tovas hana. I don't know if it's shayach hefker and tovas.
Because effectively you still have the right to.
I don't know. It will be. I wasn't mafker that anyone could be zok on that tovas hana. I don't know if it's shayach to be zok on tovas. I don't know.
The argument of Hefker, but the fact that because why would Tovas Hana? It's not yours already because it's Truma. You're saying that because you have Tovas Hana, even though it's not yours, gives you a balance.
I don't know if that balance you could.
It can't be mafker.
I don't know if you can be mafker too.
Because that would make sense. That would explain what he's saying. Right.
So he says, "Ayin, this chiddush of Chamesh Kilo Achrayas, this is only if you learn bittul as hefker."
Right.
But if you learn bittul works other ways, then it's even Chamesh Kilo Achrayas. What?
Rashi says something different.
Rashi says you're machshava ka'afel yara, which is not a machshava lashon of hefker. Just as long as you're not machshava and it's not chashav to you,
right?
It's enough that the Torah doesn't make you over by a row by a matzah.
Right.
Some learn Rashi means it's like kafir, but because he says also lashon it's kafir. But most people learn that Rashi means that if you don't have any chashivas for it, right? Or there's a Ran that learns it's hefker, but it's a different type of hefker. There's a Ran that says the way it works is because the word says since it's us, it's anyway not pershuso.
Right.
Except the Torah puts the Shnei Duram Meinu Shusel, and the Torah put it pershus. So if you're Megaladas, you don't want it. The Torah doesn't put it in your pershus. So in Mela it's like hefker. So it could be that's where you could stretch even to a case where you only have achrayas. The Torah says you're over, but if you don't want it and you're not interested, it could be the Torah doesn't make you responsible. It's not muklah. You learn it both ways. But he's going into Tefker because that's how he started that. If it's Tefker, he says it's not shaykh on achrayas Tovas Hana. He says ayin. This is Shalagasari. Ayin Shalagasari. Siman ayin zayin. Barachon Shapilpul Bar.
We skipped one there. Kevin Shalo Allah Havi Mamona V'Mahani Bittul.
Or since it's not Shalo, so it's not his mamas, he can't be Mavata because Bittul. He's going like Bittul is Hefker. Rak Linyan Lav or Ukmeir Torah B'Shuso. Torah puts in your shus that you're going to be over, avalo levato. But it doesn't put in your shus that you can be mafker it.
So it seems that the Tovas Hana is not mine.
Yeah, I just don't know. That goes back to I'm not sure if it can be mafker Tovas Hana. But the pashas he's going, it's not. And he said before once, I think a couple of weeks ago he said we pass Tovas Hana is not mum.
Right.
Now he says ayin Shalagasari the achrona shapilpul dvar because the Shalagasari says a big chiddush. It comes out there's he's talking about lava netik liyaseh because there's chitas rishonim that learn out from the Gemara that by Rabbi Moshe is a lava netik liyaseh of tashbisu.
Right.
And he speaks about that there's a cloud that if there's a lashon of Gemara that if the lav is kolol more than the essay, you don't call it a lava netik liyaseh. So he says as far as the lav, you're over the lav even on Chamesh Kibul Achrayas. And he says Chamesh Kibul Achrayas. He says you can't be Mavato, and if you hold Tashbisu, Bittul from Tashbisu, so it comes out Tashbisu doesn't apply to this Chametz. He says could be the Bachlal. There's no Tashbisu and Chamesh Kibul Achrayas.
Interesting, because you can't be on Pesach, you can't do bittul anyways, as a way of tashbisa.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you can't.
But you can do tashbisa before it becomes us. Let's say chametz is it's in the process of becoming.
There's a lashonitic say. In other words, there's an essay. It's interesting.
You're right. Normally, the essay on Pesach was a destroyer, but he's saying if you learn bittul as part of tashbisa. So you see that because the Rishonim, not Tosis, but the Rishonim say that you learn bittul because it's like Rashi says because it says tashbis, so it says tevaron or something like that. We learn that you could even do bittul. So we're talking about the pasuk of tashbis was applying to chametz that you could do bittul on. Because one of the ways of being mekayim tashbisu is bittul. That's why the Torah used that lashon.
So it seems to be there's two inyanim of tashbisu. There's
two different ways. There's different ways you could do tashbisu.
No, when I say there's two mitzvahs of tashbisu. One is the mitzvah of tashbisu before Pesach, which has nothing to do with the love. There's a separate mitzvah of tashbisu before Pesach, and then there's lavanitic laseh to say the tashbisu of after on Pesach. There's nothing to do with tashbisu, but the tashbisu after that's on Pesach, you can't do bittul for anyway.
Yeah, but the question is, did that pasuk of tashbisu apply to chametz of Kibbutz of Akrayas, because it's the first type of tashbris that doesn't apply. It could be the whole pasuk isn't applying to that kind of thing.
Right. No, I understand. So you're saying that either it's an essay that
covers all kinds of comments, and the essay isn't completely kola. I hear what you're saying, but I have to look. I don't remember the Shagasari inside, but that was the general idea that I remember. Because he holds b'klal that could be there's no tashbris on Chamash Kibbutz Akrayas. Just like they can't be bittul on Chamash Kibbutz Akrayas.
Right.
He says, Ayin Shagasari, Uvachronish Apilpul Udvarav. Udvarav Niralin, according to that, he says, the Gamnin and Kenyan Parish, or Kasati Leil Lo Mani Bittul. He said, if someone has the Kenyan Aguf and you have the Kenyan Paris, says you can't do Bittul because you can't be Mafkir. Even the Be'emes Lav Shalo, a Kenyan Paris is not yours, because he's going Kenyan Paris is not like a Kenyan Aguf. Rak, he said, but you're still over because it's Motzi B'yado. Remember, he said that you don't need a whole bilus and the fact that Kibbutz Akrayas, and he said Kenyan Paris, even if it's not the Kenyan Aguf, that's also you don't need a whole bilus. He holds according to the Shakasarya, you wouldn't be able to, you wouldn't be over that either. Just like there's no bittul on Chamash Kibbutz Akrayas, there won't be any bittul and Kenyan Paris. Rak b'Kenyan the Rabbanan after Lamar Mahani. He said, but if you have a real Kenyan accepted the Rabbanan, maybe then it helps. Maybe it doesn't even help because it's not really yours. Tzarachin b'davar if what the din is a hefker according to the Torah on the Kenyan the Rabbanan. If it comes out, you can't be mafter a Kenyan Paris. It's a chiddush to me. Okay, we're going to stop here.